Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Welcome to the program, Daniel.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing fine, ready and raring to get to work and explain how the world works. But today we have a simple little project. We're going to find out how much money is spent on national militarism. I was going to say defense, but it's not defense. And that is the dissection of the Pentagon budget. And you know, the title of the program sort of suggests what I think, and that is, who knows what evil lurks in the Pentagon budget? And we want to play the shadow on this program and try to find out. But I even admitted to you before we started the program that as hard as we work at trying to do this, and this article is a good article, it shows how many different segments of the budget is really going into militarism. And this is something that makes it more difficult for everybody to figure out. But it's a lot of money. The people who wrote this article, came out of the Counterpunch, but it's very strong. What I want to do before we get into our little discussion for our viewers, to show how many different places, and it's too much to try to consume, but it gives you a pretty good idea. First off, they purposely hide everything. And the second off, I admit, and I think you agree, we can't ever find everything. For instance, will we ever know exactly where the CIA money comes from and how it's spent? Not going to happen. But they start off with what they call the base budget, which is $544 billion, and then when they add up all these other departments, it essentially doubles. You know, that's only half of it. One thing I learned from looking at this, in the baseline, it is paying for 600,000 private contractors.
Wow.
With all the military forces and all that we do and the State Department and everything, these are private contractors. So it's just totally out of control. But we've mentioned that before when you think about the lobbying industry in Washington. That's military industrial complex. But let me just go down this list rather quickly. They had a category called the war budget, and that is to fight the necessary wars to protect us, you know, in the Middle East and Korea and all these things. That was $173 billion. DOE is important because they hold the nuclear weapon, and that's $24 billion. Veterans benefits, but I think they can't know that. They don't know how many wars are going to be, how long people are going to live, and what the cost of medicine is going to be. But anyway, at the present time, there's $216 billion. Wow. Of course, nobody ever can measure the nearly 7,000 troops that were lost since 9/11. Department of Homeland Security, $69 billion. Here it was supposed to be Homeland Security. No, it's for the military-industrial complex. International Affairs, State Department, and USAID. That is another $51 billion. $80 billion for intelligence gathering to make sure they warn us of all the problems, you know, like they really helped us out prior to 9/11. At that time, it was $40 billion. And since it was a total failure, they doubled the budget. But I don't think we're twice as smart about that. And then the other one that they include, so this has been pretty thorough. They try to estimate amount of debt in the system coming from this, and they say the interest just on paying for that portion of it is another $156 billion. Wow. So it is out of control, and you know, compared to other countries, we should be well defended. We have a lot of weapons, we have a lot of economic clout, we have the reserve currency of the world, but we have more weapons than almost everybody else put together. It's just extreme.
Yeah, it is. And when's the last time we won a war either?
If you measure that. 19
years in Afghanistan, and you know, we're going to try to sue for peace. But you know, we talked about this in the show previously. Last year they came to the conclusion of the great big Pentagon audit, the budget audit. Remember that? Yeah. And this is what Shanahan, who's now the acting defense secretary, he was only deputy at the time, he said, "We failed, but we never expected to pass." You know, it's amazing. And according to an article that I was looking at in The Nation, which was from last November, the Pentagon received 54 cents of every federal dollar appropriated. And I don't know how they measure that, but you think about how much money and how much they just simply can't track it's just incredible.
You know, you mentioned Shanahan, but he was well trained. He worked for Boeing,
Yeah.
high executive in Boeing, but they didn't have to worry either. They had guarantees. How many dollars are they making from the taxpayer?
Yeah.
And building airplanes, they really don't care. And now he's going to be the defense secretary.
Yeah.
So it's an insider's deal, and that's the other thing is. That so much of this is behind the scenes, and the black budgets and the control of policy. I think more exposure of this, the better, but there's still a lot that needs sorted out. But I operate on the assumption you're not going to get it because it's designed this way. And once it gets so big and out of control, there's no way. You can't put one person in charge. And look at all these agencies. You know, look at them. We need to check all these out and make sure there's no waste or fraud. I'm always annoyed with, will you sign this bill and say we're going to do away with waste and fraud, and mark down we just saved $100 billion. What a farce,
yeah.
You know. So.
You know, but the sloganeering is always so intense. We're underfunding the military. Obama underfunded the military. I'm going to come in and fully fund the military. You know, in the same Nation piece, they interviewed our old friend Chuck Spinney, who we've had on the show and I've known for probably 20 years, famous whistleblower from the 80s. At the Pentagon. But he says basically the Pentagon is just making up their numbers. They just make it up and they ask for more. He goes into how one of these scams works, and a scam is really the word for it. The DoD consistently overestimates the inflation rates on weapon systems, and when the actual inflation rate turns out to be lower than the estimates, they don't return those excess funds to the Treasury like they're supposed to by law. They put them into what they call a merged surplus account, which you and I would call a slush fund. And that's the money. And we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars in this slush fund. And that's how you find out, oh, we got troops in Niger? Wow, we didn't know that. That's what this does.
Yes. And another factor that I've talked about for a long time, how this gets financed, it does get appropriated. I mean, they're good at, lobbying for the money, and they're very powerful, and they get pretty much what they ask for. But you still have to pay for it. And we don't pay for things, less so now than ever before. So where do we go? We go to the facilitator, which is the Federal Reserve. Without a Federal Reserve, and that was one of the reasons you shouldn't have a Federal Reserve, that you would have to think things through. What if every war, just take this century, every war had to be paid for by the people saying, yes, this is to protect us and our national security and our Constitution. What's my fair share? And everybody paid for it and pay as you go along. No, there would have been no wars in this century at all. Yeah. We would have been even stronger. The defense would have been maybe home defense.
Yeah.
And yet that is the Federal Reserve is the great facilitator, whether it's the runaway domestic welfare spending or whether it's the corporatism and the military-industrial complex. You have to have it. And just part of this has to be the hatred towards sound money. And, of course, ushering in the age, right after we had Woodrow Wilson, they suspended the gold standard to fight World War I. Then, and then FDR got rid of the gold and our right to own gold. We had this huge spending in the Depression, which the spending didn't help much. And then, of course, World War II. It's on and on. It always depends. You have to badmouth or control. What they have done over all these years, and I think they continue to do it, is make the gold look like it's a bad thing to hold gold, because that would challenge the dollar. And this thing would come down to people would wake up and say, there's something wrong. Maybe we shouldn't have so many wars. Maybe we should deal with domestic spending. Maybe we shouldn't have an open platter on any need possible if you happen to slip in this country illegally, and make sure that nobody comes up short. But no, that is why they have to undermine the gold standard. That's why they promote the counterfeiting of a Federal Reserve system. And without that, we wouldn't even be talking about this. It wouldn't happen. People would have to be taxed if they wanted these programs.
And of course, if we did have to prepay for these wars, or at least pay as we go as individual Americans, probably 9/11 wouldn't have happened, because we wouldn't have been irritating the Middle East so much. But even if it had happened, they probably would have been looking a little more closely at your mark and reprisal, because it's a cheap way to go get the guy who at least was claimed to have done it. But you know, this Michigan State University professor, Mark Skidmore, he was looking at the Pentagon's accounting practices, and he couldn't believe what he thought he was seeing. And so he went in there and looked around. What he discovered, a mind-boggling $21 trillion of Pentagon financial transactions between 1998 and 2015 could not be traced, documented, or explained. 21 trillion, that's almost our whole debt. They had no idea what happened.
Comprehend it.
Yeah, it's hard to comprehend.
And you wonder why the trust in the dollar remains. But I think it should warn people that if it's logical to think that just creating money out of thin air endlessly eventually must end, it does, but you just don't know when and how that's going to come about. But you know, the one thing is this is not nearly as big as the trillions that you're talking about, but it's very important because the CIA is the outfit that is always involved in getting us into trouble. They're involved with the coups that occur and the foreign policy, but they don't. We don't know. We can't find out exactly where they get the money. And in this article, they said they get it from various different places. But also the one that I think it was during the Iran-Contra scandal where the evidence became clear that they are in business.
Yeah.
You know, they're in different, and they're like so-called normal businesses, and they're making money. But of course, they get their starter cash from drug dealing.
Yeah.
You know? So that's part of the budgeting. There's no way to ever know. You know how much that is, because you know when you have that ticket of the protection of being a CIA agent, not too many of them go to jail ever, and it's a very, very dangerous system and a powerful system that undermines our whole political system and our judicial system.
Of course, the only ones that go to jail are the whistleblowers like John Kiriakou.
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
But if we could just get one message across to you know, and I think a lot of our viewers already get it, but the Pentagon doesn't defend the U.S. You know, the Pentagon budget enriches the well-connected elite. And I think it's nowhere more obvious than when you look into the F-35 program. It's a microcosm of the Pentagon as a whole. It was supposed to be a cheap, multi-purpose plane to take over from, you know, the F-16, the F-22, and it was supposed to cost about, I think, about $38 million a copy. It shot up to about 158.4 on average, and it's no good. It doesn't work. And the Lockheed Martin is panicking. They're believe it or not, just a couple of days ago they announced they're going to discount. They're going to give a discount, maybe some coupons. They're going to knock it down from 89.5 to 80 million per plane. But the problem is, and it's encapsulated in a good article, very good article in the National Interest in March of 2019, with the simple title, "Why the F-35 Isn't Ready for War." And there was a recent study about the F-35 that said the Navy version of the F-35 is, quote, almost never ready for combat, according to a document obtained by the Project on Government Oversight.
Right.
The plane is no good, but it's cost, what, $1 trillion to develop and manufacture?
And the repairs continue to feed into the coffers of the companies that build it.
And the Air Force is saying, we want to buy some F-15s now. And the Lockheed can't believe it. Why are you going to buy Boeing F-15s? This 35 is supposed to make up. No, they say, we'd rather get the F-15s. We don't want the 35.
Yeah. Now, I like the way you put this, that we're to believe that we're spending all this money for the benefit of the United States, and you make the point that that's really not it. And it reminds me of the many times I've made the complaint of the propagandists for war. And it's always said that we must go. We're in great danger. And we have to go over, you know, and get the Iraqis and Saddam Hussein to protect our Constitution and protect our freedom, which nothing could be further from the truth. But they say it over and over again, and then a bunch of people come to think it, oh yeah, and then but the lies are perpetuated so much, I believe it. I just hope that these recent years of the evidence to show there's a lot of fake news out there, that people will be alert. They're saying, well, maybe it isn't true. Maybe we shouldn't be at loggerheads with North Korea. And just think this week, this is a minor incident, but it's typical of doing things that has nothing to do with taking care of America, but it costs a few dollars to do that. And that is, the North Koreans are starving because we put sanctions on them. They're no more a threat than the man in the moon. They're not going to come over here. Anyway, people will argue with me on that, but they are not a threat. So they're trying to survive, and they have coal. And of course, the environmentalists probably are behind this scheme. So they have I think it was a large ship hauling coal to America Samoa. Oh, but we were alert. We had our Navy out there, and we captured the ship, and we stole the coal, and the crew is probably still being held. So that's a minor cost, but it's the insanity of this, just looking for trouble. And then at the same thing, oh yes, we think we're going to work things out pretty well with North Korea. We're talking and we're practicing diplomacy. Yeah, that's great diplomacy.
Yeah. We're safe from North Korea's coal.
Yeah.
We should feel safe. Well, I would just close with a little bit of news, and we have something on the Ron Paul Institute website, ronpaulinstitute.org. This past week, and this is troubling news, John Bolton went over to the CIA. He met there with Gina Haspel. He went with Pompeo, with Shanahan. They met in a special room where only the most sensitive information, intelligence can be shared. And apparently, from the reports, they were talking about Iran. And they were talking about special intelligence on Iran. So people that have memories of back in 2002 and 2001 remember that Dick Cheney made that same trip over and over and over. But what he was doing, he was twisting arms of the intelligence analysts saying, you better make sure that your analysis matches our pre-done conclusions. So this should be, I think, a red flag. I also want to remind everyone to subscribe to this channel. Dr. Paul, our subscriber base is going up, 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 and we're happy about it. If we get motivated by it, we want to work even harder to bring the real news. So please subscribe and encourage others to subscribe to the Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube.
Yes, and that is good news, and I'm very pleased with it that people will tune in to get information. We get a lot of compliments because one reason that it seems, at least they give us credit for doing well, we don't have much competition. Nobody's out there trying to tell the people the truth about the budget, what's going on, and the ridiculousness of our foreign policy, the evils of the monetary system, and the need for true free markets, and quit buying into this thing that there's a competition going on now between socialism and capitalism, as if we have true free market capitalism. We have corporatism in contest with people who want to make it much worse by making it more socialistic. And that's what we hear endlessly. But the good news is that these last couple of years taught people to say, well, there's something out there called fake news, and we ought to be more discriminatory on understanding. But it's up to the individual to decide what they're going to believe, and they just can't click on the TV and say, oh, well, all 3, 4, 5 stations said it's a danger and we have to go. Let me send my kids over there and take a little risk and defend our freedoms. It's ridiculous. But I think that in time, the people will wake up because they will have to. This system cannot be financed through the Federal Reserve System and these special interests. Even this trade war going on, hardly ever do they talk about the distortions in the trade between the United States and China. They think it's the ability to trade and have agreements, but they never talk about the deal we have. We're trading a lot with China. And guess who's on the best side of it? We're on the best side. We print money. We create digits on a computer, and they give us stuff because we own the world currency. And then there's a distortion. Well, they don't buy enough stuff from us, but we buy stuff from them, but at bargain prices. But that's to be not discussed. It's not to be discussed. That has something to do with the problems that we have. We just say, well, what we need are tariffs here and there and punish people and capture North Korean coal ships, and that's going to solve the problem. It isn't. What we need is a clear vision of what free market is all about, the free market system, how it works, what sound money is all about, what non-interventionist foreign policy is all about, and why this all stems from a principle called the practice of liberty, the civil liberties for each and every individual. Set a good example, so maybe somebody else around the world might say, hey, they have the right idea. Liberty is the answer, not coercion and authoritarianism. That's been tried for 6,000 years. Let's give up on that. Let's talk more about the importance of personal liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.